Welcome to our webinar, The Nonprofit Leadership Dilemma, how to identify and develop new leaders for tomorrow's challenges. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dennis Miller. I'm not going to go over my whole bio, but I spent 25 years first in the hospital healthcare world. I was a chief executive officer at the age of 38, just a few years ago, you can tell. I was a corporate executive for 7 years, president of another medical center, and started my firm actually back in 2007. And today we're a national firm with about 17 executives in our group. And we are one of the largest executive search firms for nonprofits in the country. And we have our Institute for Transformational Nonprofit Leadership and Board Performance. So we do a whole lot of board and leadership development. So that's kind of a little bit, I've been author of a number of books. And I always tell people, Mrs. Fritz, my 7th grade English teacher, knew I wrote 2 sentences together, she'd have a heart attack, but she knew I wrote 5 books. I don't know what she would do, Anthony, maybe have a little party or something like that. So Anthony, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Oh, sure. Thank you, Dennis. Well, welcome everyone to our webinar. Great to have everyone here. My name is Anthony Pantaleone, and I'm the Vice President of Sales for a company called Talexes. We specialize in assessments and surveys to help organizations enhance all aspects of development, talent management, selection. So those are our areas of expertise. And I've been partnering with Dennis and the DCM team for a number of years now, right, Dennis? So it's been about over 6 years.
At least. It seems longer than that, but we are both New York Giant fans, Anthony. That makes life okay so right now, right? So anybody, we probably have a few Eagle fans, I think, in the presentation if we can. Anthony, great to have you here. Anthony is a great friend and very knowledgeable, and we're glad to be partnering with Talexes for a number of years here. Couple of objectives here. It's quite simple. How do you identify and develop new leaders within your organization today? How do you proactively do it? How do you identify the competencies and skills that you will need to be successful? And how do you create a professional leadership and development plan for your entire organization? Before we start, I'd like you to go, each one of you, to go into the chat room. Just be curious. You can list your name and be like, just curious, how many of you in your organization today have some form of professional leadership development program? Just curious to see, go into the chat room and you can put your name if you like, your organization, just like curious to see how many of you, if anybody has it, just curious. Good, Stephanie, good, okay. Good, Jason, okay. Lori, great. We got a lot of yeses, a lot of nos. Nothing formal, we get that all. I see that. Yes, okay, that's all good. That's all good. So, okay, it's all good. All right, good stuff here. So let me ask this question here. If I was to ask your organizations, do you have a plan to develop new donors and new dollars? I would venture to guess probably all of you would say yes, okay? If I was to ask you as an organization, how many of you have a plan to achieve your strategic goals? I'm assuming most of you would either say yes, or you just finished a strategic plan, you're embarking upon one, or you have one that's stale, collecting dust on someone's executive office shelf. If I ask you, do you have a plan to maintain financial solvency, or do you have a budget, an annual report, financial plan? Most of you will certainly say yeah. Yet based upon your comments in the chat box, it's 50-50 about, do you have a plan to develop your leaders for today and tomorrow's challenges? And you think about that, about you got plans for donors and dollars, strategic goals, and financial sustainability, but the idea of developing your own leaders is sort of 50-50. Okay? And today we want to give you a roadmap as to how we would recommend going about doing that. And we want to entertain your questions. I should let you know all that this session is recorded. Everybody that registered will receive the recording and the PowerPoint. So I want you to know that. So if you're worried about taking notes, you're going to get the whole PowerPoint, things like that here. All right, we're going to go through the steps of the process of developing a leadership development program. Now, when I say leadership, I'm referring not just to the executive team reporting to the CEO. Well, I use the word leadership to define anybody in your organization with the title of supervisor, manager, assistant director, director, vice president, whatever. Anybody that's overseeing another individual or overseeing a program or service. So I use the leadership in a broad context of leadership, everybody in your organization. Okay. The first thing I think you need to do, and I'm sure you have, or you will, is identify what are your strategic goals. What are the 2 to 4 goals that you have to achieve your vision? Next, and by the way, I'm going to say sometimes very low level of organizations, my experience of almost 40 years, have a clear, compelling vision that inspires people, that's measurable, but that's a whole nother topic. But what are your strategic goals? Number 2, I want you to create, I'm sure you have one or you may, a comprehensive table of organization, those boxes. It's not necessarily that you put the name of the person in there, but what is the titles that you have there in those boxes? And then I want you to go and have this discussion. And we're going to go over those competencies, but what would be the competencies?
Yeah, that's it. They can just get to that, brother. We can get no food, anything.
Yeah, if you could please mute your phone. Thank you. Okay. So if you could develop a table of organization and say for each of those positions, if it was vacant, do you automatically got to go out there and put an ad in Indeed or hotjobs.com or whatever those things are besides the search we do at the executive level? What are the competencies, which are different than skills, competencies or characteristics, like collaborator, innovative thinker, team player, etc.? What are the competency, skills, personal attributes, maybe education, that if that job was becoming vacant, what would you need to have to replace that? And then those competencies and skills, you're going to try to develop that in your own professional development program in your organization. So you want to develop a talent, a pool of current and potential leaders. And we'll get into that as to who you may identify. Again, you want to identify goals and talent profiles for all leadership positions. So each one of those boxes, it becomes vacant. What are those key things that you would look for in somebody? And then you want to summarize, communicate that to your entire organization, that you're building a professional leadership development program. And these are all the positions that are capable of being in it. And what are those skills and competencies that you're gonna focus in on? That's step 1. Step 2, you got to summarize all that, right? You got to summarize all those attributes, skills, experiences together as part of step 2. Now, there are some people that say allow everybody into the leadership development program, and others say let's reward high performers only. So I'm going to turn over to right now to step 3 for Anthony to kind of walk through the next step. So the first step you got to clear: table of organization, identifying the competencies and skills for each position, kind of summarizing those that you need to have for success. And then we start with number 3, Anthony.
Thank you, Dennis. So the first component of step 3 is to develop a performance review program. So there needs to be a program where you have feed forward so individuals can focus on constant and never-ending improvement. So if you have a formal performance review program, everyone can apply specific energies in those areas. And when we have a tendency to have a focus and it requires our attention, the energies will flow in that direction to help us make improvements. The next component of step 3 is to identify top performers. So ask yourself this question: how is top performance defined in your environment? And that's really important. The operative word there is your environment, because your environment is very unique, and it's really helpful when you're able to quantify the context of your environment and understand what really drives success in that environment. The next component of step 3 is to benchmark success attributes. This is a process when you're able to quantify these success attributes, you'll understand where the clues are. So what are those attributes that continually translate into success in your environment? The next component is consider a talent assessment tool. So this would be a 360 process. It's important to have some type of assessment tool where you're getting real-time performance feedback. A 360 process enables that real-time performance feedback from different perspectives. So once again, it's another data point, but it enables anyone in a leadership role to get this real-time feedback so they can course correct. Because if we don't have that type of real-time gauge in your environment, we might be asking ourselves, like, how is a person either manifesting or not in a good way in this environment? So that feedback is really a great opportunity to make those corrections along the way. The next component is to communicate leadership criteria. And it's always helpful when we have a definition, when we define leadership criteria, because when this is understood, when it becomes more like tangible, then it really is something where it can become inspirational and aspirational within an organization. And then lastly, build a leadership council. By building a council of leaders, these individuals can lead by example throughout all levels of the organization and provide behavioral examples that everyone can model.
Anthony, I just want to jump in for a second if I can too. Think about this, about retaining employees, right? Think about how great someone's going to feel to be in your organization and be kind of rewarded and admitted or recognized into your leadership council. How good will they feel knowing that they've been recognized for their talents? The whole thing about the cultural resignation is really ties down to, do people feel listened to, cared for, heard? And is there an opportunity to move forward here? Those things that are lacking are the biggest reasons why people leave. Okay.
And I'd like to just unbundle a couple of these components in step 3 and to provide some more specific examples about the what ifs here and the value that it can provide. So when we talked on the previous slide about identifying success attributes and benchmarking these attributes, in order to do that, you need to have a psychometric assessment tool so that you can quantify these intangibles. And that's usually a step that a lot of organizations may overlook. But when you can make that progression and take characteristics that are ordinarily intangible and make them tangible, then you have a really strong point of reference. And this can be accomplished in a couple different ways. One is you can examine the shared attributes of your current leaders. So with this type of approach, we assess a current group of leaders and then determine a range within each of the scales that you can see here on the visual. And that range will typically be based on the clusters of the individuals. So it's usually like the majority clusters. And that's how this range would then be established across each of these key scales here, as you can see. This is a very important exercise because it'll help to validate the attributes that form the foundation of success in your environment. Now, an alternative approach is to interview subject matter experts and use like a talent profile questionnaire to quantify this range within each scale. That process is very good as well. It's based on perception of different subject matter experts, but it is a way to gather their perspective and take what's typically just in our minds and make that more tangible. So that's another process. So once the benchmarking process of success attributes is finalized, it becomes a foundational element to any leadership development program. With this unique approach, we're able to benchmark core attributes that are specifically aligned to your organizational strategy. And this customized approach provides a context-based benchmark that your organization can use for talent pool selection and development planning. And here's an example of what that would look like. So once we're able to marry the benchmark with the individual scores, so the individual who would take the psychometric assessment, you can see here on the left side of the visual, an individual who falls outside of that benchmark range, their scores are represented in orange. So what this does is it provides an opportunity here. So when you have something now that we're able to quantify, you can bring this awareness so the individual can be more aware of the context and bring a higher level of intentionality to situations and self-manage those potential derailers. So here's an example. And we typically use a basic development model of what you can do more of, less of, and begin doing differently. And you can employ this type of model in any type of development conversation, with or without an assessment like this. But we typically would use this type of model. And if we were to focus on, let's just say, one scale from the visual here, we have three that come to our attention: the competitiveness, the sense of urgency, and the take charge scales. Well, let's just say we wanted to focus on take charge as an example. So in this context, what this tells us is the ideal range is 5, 6, and 7, meaning that the range of take charge is somewhat balanced there. The individual is scoring more to the right, so it tells us that the individual's tendency towards being a take charge type person is on the higher side. And that's neither good nor bad, but the context is what will tell us if it is good or bad. And now this becomes the opportunity to have a really meaningful conversation with someone and think a little bit about how this 8 in take charge is being manifested day to day in a leadership type role. So as an example, let's just say your organization is really focused on innovation, just coming up with new ideas to generate revenue and to drive more efficiencies, and to contain costs, let's say. Well, that requires a lot of collaboration. So if an individual as a leader is wired towards being like high in take charge, by default, they're not wired for collaboration. And if they don't recognize this and they don't have an objective means to bring this type of awareness, they could operate on their default day in and day out. And this could be a real derailer. When we have this type of awareness and aha moment with an individual, and we go over this type of information, and then we can formulate that into a development plan, now we can work on these activities that'll help the individual develop some learned behaviors and a newfound awareness. We can't expect to change, right? I mean, that would be unrealistic, but we can expect to bring awareness and more intentionality to the day-to-day, which can then have a broader impact. The next slide.
Anthony, I'm going to just jump in for a second too, because what you said is important, which is that we as a firm use this tool all the time in 2 areas: in our leadership development, leadership coaching, and obviously in our executive search business to kind of assess kind of final candidates. But at all times, it's used for development purposes. This is not for criticism. This is not for any of that. All these tools are used to help people develop. That's our entire focus we have in a punishment is how do we help people develop? That's very important here. This is not about, oh, I got you. This is not about, oh, you're done. This is about finding a way to develop people, and that's what's important to us. Thank you.
Yes, and Dennis, the previous slide here, what that shows is another, yes, thank you, Dennis. This shows another example of opportunities for development. So if you remember the previous slide, the individual was an 8 in take charge. Here could be another individual in your organization who scores a 2 in take charge. Now, each one of these scores represents a strength and a blind spot. The context brings that out. So let's just say we're operating on the same premise here of driving innovation within the organization and we want to collaborate. Well, we talked about the person who scores an 8 in take charge and what their derailers might be. Well, how about the person who scores a 2 in take charge? Maybe their default is that they're not leading enough of team meetings or conversations to drive this collaboration, and they're not communicating enough. They're not asserting themselves enough. So that could be a derailer. So as Dennis mentioned, there's no like gotcha moments here. It's just about awareness and then helping the individual to be more mindful and intentional in their day-to-day. And then most importantly, make sure that that mindfulness in terms of day-to-day is linking to an overarching strategy. Because then we can take kind of like the macro and tie it into the micro actions here with a tool like this and provide everyone with the individual, the custom individualized blueprint to execute day in and day out. And most importantly, be accountable. Because when we have something quantified and well-defined and we agree to it, then we can become accountable to ourselves each and every day to follow through.
Anthony, I'm going to add something to discussion here too, which is this. These scores over here, this is not a test, but an assessment. The scores, though, are how one is wired, your DNA, when you wake up in the morning, what it's like. It does not necessarily mean how you perform. So I'll give you 2 examples here. I've seen people with a low people context score, but in the workplace setting, they're extremely extroverted. They're engaged in it with their colleagues. They're engaged with their clients. They're engaged with their consumers. But when they come home, they're exhausted and they'd rather spend time, being some time for themselves, reading a book, watching a movie, walking their dog, and that's okay. It's just how one is wired. Another case here, you can have a high score like here, an 8 sense of urgency, and so that's great. But sometimes too high of a score could also mean you're not focusing on precision and accuracy. And the same thing with take charge. You want someone to take charge, but you don't want to take charge too much. You want to also allow people to feel they're part of the process here. So these are just, it's a tool we use called the Telestra MX assessment, a tool that helps us and you develop your leadership team. Does that make sense, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing those insights, Dennis. So now, up to this point, we examine the importance of measuring foundational attributes that really form the base of performance. As you can see from this hierarchy, performance is more than a measurement of those core attributes like the cognitive attributes, the personality attributes, the interest attributes, and the benchmarking, the job fit. Performance also relies on behaviors, skills, and competencies that will drive consistent performance as well. So we talked earlier about having well-defined guidelines. So we can have well-defined attribute guidelines, and then we can also have well-defined behavior, skills, and competencies that focus on what it takes to be an effective leader. So the next leadership development progression here is an example of a 360-degree process that connects the behaviors, skills, and competencies to leadership performance. So it's difficult to develop what's not clearly defined. So a 360 helps us define and measure the skills that are most relevant to your corporate strategy at any given time. And this is an example of a leadership talent assessment that measures 5 universal leadership competencies. And then those competencies have 17 skills. So they unbundle into 17 skills, as you can see from this visual. And then the 17 skills would actually unbundle to 62 specific behaviors that are measured in relationship to these skills and competencies. So they're really a link to universal leadership performance, meaning at a minimum, all leaders should be measured against these types of skills so skill gaps can be identified as part of a multi-pronged leadership development program. Now, for step 4, I'd like to turn it back over to Dennis.
Yeah, Anthony, I just want to stay on this for a little bit too for a second here. Is that
Sure.
this? I'm sure you have tools, and we have tools that do executive leadership assessment, performance evaluation tools, self-evaluation tools, etc. But you can have, and what we recommend everybody is that you could be a goal achieving person, achieving your goals, but not working well with other people. So on your annual performance evaluation, you can come out with a good score. You had agreed upon goals and objectives, you've met them. But why we like the 360 tied into that, because it's great for development, because it says, hey, we can tell you've done a great job on this, but your team doesn't feel that you're listening to them, or that you're not engaging your employees, or there's not always a clear sense of direction. So this is like, you've heard the term perception is reality. So we like to use for our clients both an annual performance evaluation tool and the 360 tool, because it gives much more information for developing the person. Makes sense. Okay. All right. So step 4, we're ready to have you start a development program. You clearly understand that the whole focus of your leadership team is to achieve a number of strategic goals and objectives. Your vision, your financial sustainability, impacting programs and services, and you've identified through that table of organization all the skill sets and competencies you're going to want to have. And there's a common element to a lot of it. Now, some of the competencies and skills sets and attributes you need at maybe the supervisory level may be very different than at the executive team level, but a lot of similarities. So you want to then craft that and develop your own professional development program. But then for each person that you would decide to admit into your program, you want to create an individualized professional plan for their top performers and leadership council members. So there's someone there that you can do. Now, this is just an idea of some topics that you may want to include in your own personal leadership development program. And we'll talk about your ability to do it or other people here. So clearly, emotional intelligence is a major factor today, what people are looking for. The ability to be empathetic with other people's emotions, how they feel, how your emotions impact other people in the workplace, how to do a performance evaluation, how to deal with difficult employees, budgetary skills, communication, brand builder. There's a whole range of topics. These are just some examples that you can have that would be applicable to perhaps anybody in your leadership development program. So there's just some ideas here. You may have other ideas. It could be clinical topics to have, but certainly management and personnel topics to have. One of the things in step 5 is that you want to, where you can, identify mentors within your own organization, from your own managers and leaders, where you can identify someone on your team who'll be a great mentor, coach. How does that make somebody feel to say? That makes them feel terrific. On occasionally, you can engage outside experts like us, like ourselves, to help you with some aspects of your program, but a lot of this you'll want to do yourself here. You want to build a library of either courses, online courses, like we have books, articles, and other conferences, but you want to build things that's like in your own reference library. On our website, we have tons of free information, free articles, blogs, webinars that we've done like this. And for those of you that came a little bit late, just this entire recording from beginning to end, and the PowerPoint will be given to you. You'll get it relatively soon. Okay, just you want to kind of promote the program. Now, there's 2 schools of thought here. Again, do you allow any employee to want to apply for your leadership development program, or do you reward people based upon their performance? And Even within my own group of 17, 18 of us, there's a little division here. But here's my perspective. I like the idea of rewarding and recognizing people. I don't think we do it enough. And so then when we have that, you can say to someone, and I'm being half facetious here, but say, listen, John or Jill, we hope that you can get into a program, but if you came to work on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, just like you done Thursday and Friday, would help. I'm being joking here, but clearly, I think it's a reward and recognize. And for people to say, I'm going to make more of a commitment to it. So that's, I think, step 5: manage participants' progress and report results. And I'll never forget this, Anthony. This was, back, seems like 100 years ago in my medical center days. When I remember when we had an employee, employee reward, monthly employee of the year, or the month, and things like that in a year. And we used to have a box outside the cafeteria for suggestions. And most of the times that we look into it, it was cupcake wrappers. No one participated. And I was ready to disband the idea, but I said, you know what, let's the employees build on it. And then one other day we had a session where I talked to the large management group, and the people say, I don't even know what, we use the board a lot. What's the board? So our board meetings were at 7 a.m. So one time we decided to have meet the board. So we'd have like 250 people in the organization as part of management with 2,500 employees. And we had the board members lined up. And what we did, though, one of our board members owned a professional baseball team. Now I think it's a AA team for the Yankees. But whoever their last name was put on the back of the game shirt with the number 1 for January all the way to 12 for December. The pride that people had, so everybody to see them, that they were the monthly winner, was amazing to me. And then when they picked the employee of the year, it was almost tearful and joyful. And so one of the things we need to get back into, I know the business, I've been in nonprofit service 38 years at least. I know the challenges that all of you face. I know the alligators around your ankles and get up into your calves, hopefully not above the knee. I know the issues with regulations and all that. But and I know that nobody achieves anything without people, staff. And one of the best ways to develop staff and retain staff is for them to feel that they're heard, they're respected, they have a chance to develop and grow. I know this from in a corporate world where half the people that were on workers' compensation were not there because their back hurt. They couldn't stand their supervisor. So it's really important. So we start off the session today about, do you have a strategic plan? Do you have a plan to develop donors? You have a plan to sustain your financial situation? And everybody would say yes. But I think it's really, really important, which is what I want to convey here, is that it's not difficult. It's not expensive. But you should have some form of professional development in your organization if you're going to really both identify leaders, but retain leaders and develop leaders for the future. So what are some of the benefits of a professional leadership development plan? High level of employee retention, guaranteed. Improve morale. Increase performance and motivation. I do believe that, give everybody a chance. But point out to people, the one who's not been selected for the program, John or Jill or Jane or whatever, is that, whatever, give them a good reason, but say that's what's going to be important. Career advancement. It energizes the entire organization when people feel recognized. You're developing your own mentors and coaches within. That's also a way of rewarding people. And you have your own people. But what's really, really, really important, all this, what does this matter? You're creating a culture of success, and you're creating greater social impact to the community you serve. All this about identifying and developing tomorrow's leaders and today's leaders for tomorrow's challenges. It's personal interaction. It's when people feel that they've been heard, they've been listened to. So I wanted to convey with Anthony today, who's been my friend and partner for many, many years here, the steps involved in creating a program. Now, a couple of things here. It's required for transition of any leadership position. You want to identify employees who have the skills and competencies or potential to develop them to make sure your organization has the right people in the right place at the right time. We are a major executive search firm and do dozens and dozens of searches a year for executive level positions. But you don't have to go out for everybody in your organization and hire a search firm. Well, not necessary. But you certainly don't have to put ads all the time, every time someone leaves. Hopefully you're going to focus on trying to identify people ahead of time. So when someone does leave, and no one stays in a job forever, they're available. I know, and I'm sure you know, I'm sure many of you have been promoted within your organization. How good does that feel? And what message that sends to everybody else? Again, it requires you to identify the key goals you face. What are those competence and skills? You need to address them. Now, I can tell you this. In years past, and there's nothing wrong with it, in years past, boards were seeking, when they, in the nonprofit space, was someone who was very mission-driven, most important, it still is, very mission-driven. Someone who was a good community relations person, a program developer, maybe a grant writer. And those skill sets are very important today, but there's others. Today, boards are seeking people with visionary thinking, to be able to see the potential of the organization before anybody else does. People who have high level of emotional intelligence, people who are relationship builders, who can learn to find a way to build trust and respect within the organization, not demanded because of my title, but because I've earned it, my credibility. People look for people that are collaborators. They don't have to go it alone all the time. Collaborate with people. Be an inspirational motivator, reward and recognize. A succession planner, people developing future plans here. A brand builder, people who can communicate the success and the impact your organization is having so people get to know who you are. It's very important to be able to have all that in today's world to succeed. And again, developing your own mentors and coaches. And what better way to feel part of the organization than to feel that you've been rewarded as a mentor or coach? So the question becomes down to sustain your mission, to have the impact in your community and the values you want to incorporate in the workplace, depend upon a successful leadership development plan. Are you ready? Now, I'm not going to go into all this right now. Again, on our website, we have all these tools that are extremely affordable, but we talk about, we have the MX that measures the core personality traits you see with Anthony, the 360 tool, and obviously, you know, more information about us on our website, about our search capabilities, but our Institute for Transformational Nonprofit Leadership, there's a lot of stuff you can see. Very, very affordable. Everything's like $900 or less, $350. For 6 members of your entire team, we can create a performance evaluation tool for you for $1,500. So I'm not going to go through it all. We have online courses, how to become a high-performing team. You can register up to 25 people for only $975 in total, not per person, for a year. So there's a lot of stuff that we have. We have certificate programs and things like that. I just want to kind of share some of that with you here. I'm going to have a chance to see if we can take some questions now, Anthony, from our fellow colleagues here. And I see my friend Peggy over there. I say hello to Peggy. Hey, Peggy. And so does anybody want to go in the chat box or raise your hand and ask a question here? I hope that we struck a couple of nerves here, maybe, and with some ideas and suggestions here. But if you were, and something else here, it's part of our tradition here. Any one of you that are participating today that would like a free 30-minute consultation from us, all you have to do is email me, dennis.miller@, and I'll put in the chat box. If I can learn how to do that, Anthony. You know me with technology, I'm dangerous, right? Here we go. So it's dennis.miller@dcm-associates.com. Anybody that wants a free consultation for 30 minutes of your organization, just reach out to me. I'll schedule one with me or someone else on my team, but I'm happy to do it. I hope, though, my goal here was not to sell you things, was to inspire you and give you support to develop this, because it's vital. I just see it in my practice. Let's see, does anybody else have any other questions at this stage of the game? Anthony, let's see, anybody else out there? Let's see what, is anybody I can pick on? Let's see if there's anybody I can pick on anybody here. Let's see here. I don't think so. I don't know here. So let's see here. Let's see here. Okay, if not, then I thank you for, oh, I'm sorry, the email again, fine, okay, it's Dennis Miller @DCM-associates. So my fat fingers, Anthony, you know. And again, go to the website. There's a lot of free stuff here. We're here to help you out. We're a national firm with people from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Washington, all the way to Florida, Kentucky, Colorado, Montana, California. I see someone's just entered the waiting room. I think it's a little bit too late, but maybe they missed the code. So anyway, I thank you all. Personally, I wish you a happy and healthy 2023, and we'll look forward to talking to you all. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.